everyone. So, this is another episode of the Soul Reconstruction Project, and I have a guest with me again. We're going to have a five-part series. Thank you for coming again. I want you to introduce yourself a little bit. But if anyone wants to go back to it will be episode 9, if I'm thinking right. Our episode today is called Who Raised You? Truth from Your Bloodline. We're starting core RIP framework recognition starting from the beginning. Like, where am I recognizing where these things might have came from, and then moving on to identification. So we're going to start talking about the conscious identity and moving on to more directing at helping people maybe the thought process and journal out this kind of process because it does, you have to do it to in order to move forward.
Mhm. Absolutely. Thank you, Janelle, for having me. I am, for those that don't know, I am Shell Parker. I am a transformation guide. And so I am a speaker, an author, and a coach. And regardless to what medium I'm using, whether it's my voice, my pen, or my leadership, the goal is the same. It is to help strong, influential women break cycles of overdoing, restoring peace in your life in every season. And just like Miss Janelle said, you cannot do this kind of identity shift, soul level work without taking a good hard look at self and where you came from. So I'm so excited to be talking about who raised you today.
Yes. So, can you tell us a little bit about conscious identity?
Well, I think at the end of the day, who you think you are is the way I'd say it. And I think we have levels of identity that we kind of recognize. Some of us don't recognize it all. It's very similar to me in terms of the conscious, the subconscious, the unconscious. There's layers to how we see ourselves and how we view ourselves. And depending on how woke you are. You may very well be at the surface level with this, and you just kind of flow through life reacting to things and you see things as they are, and it's on a very surface level, or depending on how enlightened or awakened you are, you're starting to look deeper. You're starting to ask different questions. You start to notice patterns, and you start to realize as you peel back these layers that there's depth to who you are and your identity when you consciously look at it, not from an unconscious or an absent-minded place, but when you are consciously starting to dig deeper into who you are, you start to realize that there's threads that go not just from the surface personality that you're carrying around, but it goes deeper through you, through who raised you, who raised them, the systems, the context, all of these different constructs that help to create people and beings. And all of that is woven through you. You carry it in your epigenetics. And how aware or enlightened you are to that is how conscious you are in terms of your identity. What would you say, Miss Janelle?
I was just thinking right now, like, I agree. And what I was kind of, everything you said, I agree with. What I was moving forward in my head about is I wanted to ask, like, or just think about what I'm trying to do is like a lot of people are not even thinking of themselves as an onion, peeler of the layers. And how early can we start introducing that? That's what I'm trying to do now. Is like, how early can we start having children recognize that there are different parts of them they can peel into that are way deeper than what is around them? Because we have so many distractions now. But I completely agree. I'm very much, I think what got me into my subconscious was my dreams, really focusing in on like, no, this means something. This ain't coming from nowhere. Like there was just too many weird things where I was like, okay, I'm just someone that wants to have a dream book and writes down my dreams. And that was something that, like you said with yoga, I just wanted to understand it more. I wasn't just writing it down. I wanted to know more. And that's just stuff like that that just gets you a little bit more in tuned with who you are. And I was just talking to someone the other day where we were talking about the layers are peeling, and children need to have this layers being pulled or recognized much earlier so that we are living a more conscious life rather than, unconsciously in the, like you said, the box that has been made for us.
Mhm, mhm. Absolutely. Well, too young is if you can't talk and we can't write, like honestly go back and forth in the dialogue. So we have to consider brain development, right? And the
Hmm.
parts of the brain that are developing, and when children at what age they're able to grasp these concepts and think about them. But I think as early as they're having feelings and experience in the world, and others around them in the world, when we're teaching them about feelings, and it could be as early as a biting phase, right? And helping them understand why biting, you shouldn't be biting, how this makes the other person feel, so on and so forth. So I think it's not necessarily a too early question. It's more about how you do it and how you
Oh, yeah.
humanize and add context to the experiences around them. And I think we can't have that conversation without considering the spiritual component of it. It's actually a very spiritual process, awakening and enlightenment and all these kind of elements. I think it's deeper than just looking at personality.
Yeah.
When you talk about dreams and what's coming to you subconsciously and these messages and things like that, that adds a very spiritual element to the conversation that's not just academic at all.
Yeah, no, you're right. And that's something that I've always, working with so many different age groups, has thought about like, okay, what would be beneficial to, like, for example, when I had my hair club, I had like 9 to 11-year-old girls. So I had to think about, okay, I really want them to feel that mind, body, soul of doing your hair and that root work, but how do I get it down to their level so that it's not overwhelming? It doesn't introduce way too many topics and it's something they can relate to. So, speaking of relating to, we're going to relate to our parents. We're going to try and understand what is going on. Why are we not clicking? It's like if that's what it is. Inherited behaviors, that too. Like when you start feeling like when you're arguing with a parent and it's like, wait, I feel like we're the same or we're having the same kind of pushback because of our same kind of feelings. And it's like, dang. So basically I'm talking to a brick wall. Dang. So let me go figure out my stuff so that I can go come back in a positive way. So some of the first questions that we're going to delve into is what were the unspoken rules of their world? And how were they raised? What were they taught about their identity, worth, and belonging long before they even arrived? So,
Mhm.
what are some things, even just from that core thing, can you think to share to our viewers?
This actually is the work that I do, because I think deeper on everything. And so when it's talking about personality, I don't think it's just surface. I think it's deeper. And my book actually is a teaching memoir. I am at a very pivotal point in my book where I just had an abortion and I'm going through something with the father, my then boyfriend, who is threatening me about this abortion. And I'm ashamed, I'm lost, I'm hurt, I'm angry, I'm sad, I'm all of these feelings. And I'm also a good girl, I'm an A student, I'm a daughter, I'm a neighbor, I'm a friend, I'm like all of these things. But I'm contemplating the fact that I'm also a murderer. And this is what my then boyfriend said to me at the time. And as I contemplate how in the did I get here, right? I have to peel back layers in such a way that it's not about the moment at all. And so in the book, I then go back to my grandmother's story and my mother's story, and I talk through all of those stories and take you back up to that point. Because in order for me to understand how I got to that moment, I actually need to go back and understand that. And it's actually for me a very cathartic process. There's a lot of tears, there's a lot of pain. You are uncovering truths that you had no idea about. There are stories that maybe you heard remnants of, but didn't know that part or this piece or whatever it is. But you're unleashing some stuff. However, in the midst of all of that, I see everybody for who they actually are. My grandmother was left on the doorstep of someone, and that is how her story starts. We don't know who her actual blood family is. And so, at the core of that, we're talking about abandonment. We're talking about emotional neglect. We're talking about secrecy, lies, covering up, right? We're talking about shame, the fact that nobody in the family knows anything else. We're talking about lies, right? Like, so all of that is at the core of the story. And then that is the woman who then raised my mother, at
Hmm.
least until my mother was 6 years old. And then she died when my mother was 6 years old. And the context around her death, the household, my grandfather was educated man, an executive working for the projects in the administrative office, right? A veteran, a Black Panther, but he was also a child molester and an abuser, right? So the complicated context of these two individuals, my grandmother and my grandfather, who came together to raise these children, this is everything that they brought with them. And then in the midst of that, this is an era where women still couldn't wear pants. The only jobs available to them at the time was nursing and teaching, right? Or you were a stay-at-home parent. We had my grandfather coming from a place where he helped to defend our country as a veteran. However, he was still a Black man in the service. So he was demeaned and beaten and abused, right? And what is his story, right? Who hurt him as a child coming up? There are stories about that. And so all of that is the context in which they came together and then raised a family. And so that's what my mother came up in. That's
Hmm.
what my aunts and uncles came up in. So we were talking about context and who did what and how I got to the point of being a teenager who was pregnant, right? Part of the statistic coming from poverty, I'm Black, single parent household, right? And then on top of that, I'm having an abortion. All of those statistics are there because teenage pregnancy is 100% preventable. But how did I get there? And then when you layer on the context, I'm also in an abusive relationship. There's patterns. Those patterns go back. And it's not just, oh, my mama was beat. Oh, my grandmama was beat. And so that's why I'm in a situation where I'm also being abused. It's not that simple. I definitely didn't walk into it saying I want to choose a partner that is going to hurt me in some kind of way. But how did I learn on some deeper level that love was intertwined with being hurt?
Hmm.
And that's a pattern we can trace back to my grandmother being left on the doorstep out of love and hurt.
Yeah, I'm just thinking most of the things you said, like there's a black and then there's a white version, but getting the context, I think about LA, teaching the kids LA and having context when you're reading something, having context when someone told you something, like context is so important. So it's really important in understanding. And the main thing I was thinking of your word cathartic. Um, that's just That's such a good word. Like but the opposite of it, I'm like, you could sleep better after you've dealt with this. You can journal better. That pit of your stomach anxiety that you have, it might start to go away. It might start to be like f fluttering like away. And so those are kind of the things that people need to when I think about that, I think about therapy and how therapy gets to a point where you're like, oh my God, I just feel like I'm just talking about it and it's bringing up feeling that I'm just too much and I'm done with therapy. What the heck is this? And so, but it's supposed to happen. It's supposed to volcano and erupt in a way where it just all burns away. I don't know that I'm just
Mhm.
talking, but that's what it feels like. And so that part, because I see a lot of the similarities in my history as well. And I did had to do the same things. Like, well, I know I didn't go into this like this. I had my heart wide open. I love, like this is what I'm doing. But there were so many things because of that I was totally naive, gullible, with all the words that you want to use. Like that was me. But at the end of the day, like most of the people are coming from a caring place, like coming from a wanting the love kind of place, but displacing it on where the love should be coming from, if that's right. Yeah, because it should be coming from yourself. And I've told this to friends before, like too many people are trying to get into relationships when they're not whole themselves. And that the whole halves of a whole, they're taking like literally, like I'm supposed to have half my heart cut out, and then I'm supposed to bring the, no, that's codependency. And that is what I was doing. And that's what I was doing the whole time till I had a kid. And then I was like, oh. And then I got another relationship and I couldn't break up with them. And I was like, man, there's other things wrong with me. And I was like, no, I'm celibate. Like, let me get this figured out. So I was just telling you, I like to laugh about this growth that I'm having. Like, yes, I made mistakes, and yes, it has put me in situations where I'm like, damn, like I told you, self-inflicted. So like, but I'm patching myself up and getting it together, and I'm so grateful for those experiences because I know they came from the gods, and I was meant to have this reconstruction. I was meant to do everything I'm doing now. So I don't want to go stray off from what we're actually talking about, but that's the goal, that is the goal
I'm
for everyone,
excited.
just so it's good to have that light at the end of the tunnel because a lot of people don't see the light at all.
Hmm. Hmm.
Next
I
question.
fully agree. I fully agree. It has to erupt, and I think a quote from Octavia Butler before you dive into the next topic is a great one. And she says, "In order for a phoenix to rise, it first has to burn." And everyone runs from the burning, right? But we want to celebrate the rising, and it doesn't go like that. At the end of the day, you have to let it erupt. You have to let it burn, bleed. It's the only way you can get to healing.
When I hear people say that, I think of the Mockingjay, the movie Hunger Games. But similar story, I can talk about that another time. But um, our question, and we could have answered some of this already, but thinking about what shaped the adults who shaped you, and you also included your uncles, they grew up under that household too. Like, and also we don't know anything about the family before. I do know, the family before and the family before that. Like, I have people that can tell me and give me more information. And then when I get that information, I'm like, wow, so that person would with the, and then well, no wonder they would, and then no wonder, and then you just start to look at it in like a book, and that's why
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
want to I love ancestry for that reason is that like so much of history, like I think I said in the last episode, is trying to be erased. And
Mhm.
already back then it was trying to be
But I,
erased. Like they
not
were
child,
not
child,
trying to document
child,
anything. So
child.
we need to we need to get these things and keep them safe. That's all I'm trying to say.
Mhm.
I'm being
But
honest.
that's really the reality is that when you look at trying to answer the question, right, what shaped the adults that shaped us, right? They were living in a world as we still are today, where their very existence was being erased and being denied. Like that's the reality that many of us don't want to talk about. But post-traumatic slave syndrome, that's real, right? Invisible Knapsack by Peggy McIntosh. They talks about the fact that systems create invisible burdens, and this emotional toll, right? We're carrying it whether we want to talk about it or not. We had to learn to, you know, put context around it and how to live with it and where you spoke and where you didn't speak and how you showed up and all those things. We learned to survive. We learned to cope with it. We're extremely resilient beings, but the body keeps the score. That stuff don't go nowhere. So at the
Yeah.
end of the day, all these systems, this context, living in a world where your history is being intentionally erased, snatched away from you, right? What we know is that we came from slaves when the reality is there was eons, decades, generations that took place before slavery, but that was erased on purpose. So many of us are stuck with the only way we're able to trace beyond slavery is going to get our DNA tested, right? And then we trace it that way. And I know I've done that, and I'm going back to my origin stories and, what am I most of, and how do I go study that culture instead of the culture that's being packaged and handed to me, right? Because what does African American even mean? But that's a different conversation for a different day. We ain't
Mhm.
there. But the point is, that's what was shaping those that came before us. They was growing up in a situation where their very existence, their very being was threatened, was seen as an absolute threat, and it was being erased before their very eyes. And that's a part of what shaped them, which then shaped us, whether we talk about it or not. That's all very much in there. But
Hmm.
Jim Crow, it didn't go nowhere.
Yeah. And then I think about the people that are being more bold now because of just our leadership and stuff, how they grew up and how that is playing a part in this repeated history. The history's trying to be erased, and we're repeating history also, which puts
Mhm,
me in a dystopian mood. So I really want people to do this work so that we can help the children and be the role models that we're meant to be and actually grow. Because right now it really feels like we're withering away.
mhm,
Say it that way. And a lot of people feel like they're withering away right now. So this is just that's the hardest part is to be at feeling like you're at that foundation where everything is in debris and falling apart and then trying to do this work on top of it. Like
mhm,
it's hard. So we definitely will be talking about just ways to take a break and rest and recharge from all of this emotional and like this work that you're doing. But
mhm,
hopefully, like I said, the benefits also include like you'll start feeling more energized, you'll get better rest, like that kind of things will start to naturally happen too. What did I say? What shaped the adults that who shaped you, not their behaviors, but the realities or signs. So we talked about that. How did they stay safe, accepted, and alive? So basically humanizing that, like I kind of mentioned, being like, oh, I understand why they did this. I understand why they felt this way. I understand why someone would do that. And I always grew up being like, why would someone do that? Why? Like, what is their
mhm,
process of they're like I don't get it, and
mhm,
that's always something that I and try to figure out with my students, like for them to have a better understanding with each other, because that's the most arguments start from just misunderstandings and not understanding where the other person is
mhm,
coming from. So if you could imagine your mother, father, or caregivers as children, what do you see? How
mhm,
is that helpful? And then also, if you want to share like your also personal answer,
mhm.
but why is that helpful?
The why that's helpful is because it provides context and not blame. We as people, when you're on that surface level, right, it's you see everybody and everything as isolated and separate. And that's part of the illusion, right? As long as you see it that way, then you can harm others, right? And not be affected by it or not be impacted by it. But when you recognize that we're all connected, right? You are me, I am you, the rock, the mountain, everything. We're all connected, and you put things in context. That's when the blame starts to melt away, right? It's no longer me pointing a finger at you for whatever the particular behavior was. It's more about me understanding the why behind the behavior. So when you are considering me as a teenager, right? Losing her virginity as a teenager, right? In an abusive relationship, having unprotected sex, getting pregnant, right? All of these contexts while I'm still getting A's in school, graduating from high school early. I'm still learning to be the reliable one, the strong one, the responsible one. All of these things are coexisting at the same time, both and. I'm carrying the heartache and the tragedy, and I'm also taking on the cape and the
Mhm.
mask around how I need to show up and who I need to be and what I need to do. And that's all inherited. It's all inherited from, that's the same way my mother had to come up and all my aunts and uncles in a house where you had two parents who were just as complicated, right? Abused and an abuser, right? Like all of these things happening, both and happening at the same time. And when you look at that context, this is where my mother distorted the concept of love and hurt, survival, and safety. Somehow they all got twisted in together, and love and survival and being hurt and exploited are somehow all one. So people
Yeah.
are showing you they love you when they're also harming you, but this is how you stay safe.
I almost when I think of love and survival, I think way, way back like Harriet Tubman and how love really was about survival. You kind of
Mhm,
showed someone that you
mhm,
love them through like either surviving with them or going through something of whether you're
mhm.
escaping or whatnot. So I almost feel like
Yeah,
that
yeah,
got twisted with
yeah.
systematic and social and just the way things were, where it just like everything gets rearranged and just put in out in an ugly black kind of way. But when you said love and survival, that was my first thought was like, I feel like that was where it grew, was
Mhm.
through that like surviving that they had to do.
And this is the humanizing of it, right? This is when you take the blame out and you start putting that contextual framework around it, right? And Dr. Joy, the guru, talks about this in post-traumatic slave syndrome, right? The emotional roles that we are carrying, right? These are survival strategies, right? And this is why we confuse them one with the other. And this is still going on today. It ain't like I was a teenager and once, I got through that abortion, it all stopped and everything was like perfect at that point. No, this is still happening today. And our babies that are coming up, I see it in my daughter, and this is a conversation that we have on a regular basis. These are things that we're confronting. We now have language for it. We now have an opportunity to heal it where they didn't have that opportunity before. There was no language, there was no safe space, there was no capacity to do this kind of work and have these kinds of conversations. But it absolutely was a survival strategy.
That is literally the next thing that I was going to say is what you were saying is that now I can understand why it would have been so hard to process or heal through all of this. So we are so lucky, and I feel like it's our duty to do it. Like we can't ignore it. Like it wasn't even ignored back then. I don't feel like it was ignored, but it was definitely not benefiting us, and we weren't able to share. We didn't have those spaces. It was not even thought about because they were dealing with so much other stuff. And I'm
Absolutely.
thinking of simple stuff of just being able to do yoga or just write. They didn't want us to know how to write, like, or
Right.
read, and how
Against the law,
beneficial
yes.
that stuff is to us today. And music, really beneficial to me. And
Mhm.
obviously they created their own music and then that got taken away or that got changed into something or
Yeah.
whitewashed. But music was something that brought them together. Hair, that's something that brought them together. And so that was something that, they had their few outlets, but not as many outlets and safe spaces and opportunities that we have today. So we have to
Absolutely.
seize the moment.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think at the end of the day, when you think about Maslow's hierarchy of existence, at the bottom you have survival, right? At the very top of that hierarchy, you have self-actualization. And this is the conversation we're talking about, self-actualization, identity shift, being able to peel all these layers back and live in a way where you embody this knowledge and this wisdom all integrated together. However, they were trying to survive, right? So they didn't have the luxury of getting to the top of the pyramid. However, that's the sacrifice that they made for us, right? So rather than blaming or judging, I pay homage and I say, thank you for what you've done. Because had you not lived this way, I would not have been able to see it for what it is. Live through it with you, right? And then get here to be able to understand it, put it in context, and then release the blame and the shame and the guilt and all of this around it to be able to stand here where I can humanize it and now help heal others. I don't have to pass it on because I've transmuted it, turned it into something else. And now I can teach my daughter and the generations that are coming something different. Give them tools that my ancestors didn't have the ability to do. When I choose to heal, I heal them too. I heal the whole line.
Yes, that is that main goal, whether you have kids or not. If I choose to heal anything that comes behind me, like it's going to come from a healed source, a healed origin, okay? Um, and I also just kind of want to talk about because one of the questions we had was what does love look like from our generation before and what does fear look like? And that looks very different, but it's also played a part in way back of love was also based on the fear that they were living in. They had to just
Mhm.
I would imagine being in fear most of the time. Like literally. So that's something that was just together. Or it was, we also talked about tough love, or was that tough love and fear that just were together? And that's how I feel like I was in most of the relationships and stayed where I was because it was just modeled to me and it was just all I knew and it was all that was attracted to me. So it's all that I had coming. And obviously anything that was coming this way, I was gonna be like, okay, cool. Like obviously it's meant to be, right? I cringe at some of the stuff that I've written in the past about how I really thought things were just meant to be, and it's just my attractiveness that got them. Like, no, it was your unhealed mother wounds and childhood trauma that brought them to your doorstep, and you invited them in. Like, they got dirt all over the place, and you just keep cleaning. You just kept cleaning because that's just what you're used to doing, mediating and cleaning up and just kind of wiping things away. And I think I got really good at that too. So I think that's another thing that's just passed down and everyone is doing, and we need to recognize that. We need to recognize, and some of us just get that rude awakening of it.
Yeah, it definitely comes in different ways and different forms depending on who you are and what kind of experiences you had. But I definitely think at the end of the day, the love and the fear, it remains very present today. And I don't think it's very different. I think what we're fearful of has maybe changed and morphed and kind of transformed into some other things because we definitely don't have the same kinds of, I'm not going to die for learning to read. Right. Learning to read
Yeah.
is now a fundamental requirement for all of us living in America.
Hmm.
And let's be mindful that we're talking about America. But so what we're afraid of maybe has morphed. But what we have to recognize is that we're living in a generation where anxiety and depression and fear about the future or sadness over the past plagues many of us today.
Yeah.
And when you think about the entire culture around therapy and psychiatry and this medication age that we live in, for us, many of us, this is epigenetics. This is actually trauma that is passed through our genes. And I can speak from firsthand experience, whether we're talking about myself or even my child around depression and anxiety. The medication and the traditional colonialized approaches to this don't always work. You even mentioned it yourself when you talked about therapy. I'm erupting, this is going on, but something still feel off. Like this is not enough because these traditional approaches don't actually account for the epigenetics and the trauma that is in our bloodlines, in our systems. And a medication can't cure that. It takes a different kind of work, a different kind of unraveling, of peeling back the onion, right? This humanizing and this contextual work and removing of blame. That's the kind of deep rooted shifting work that needs to happen for us to actually release the anxiety and depression that is living in our bones because it's deeper than I'm just worried about the future or I'm sad about the past. It's something
Yeah.
that's been passed down to us because we come from a lineage of folks who were purposely erased, maimed, claimed, and renamed to something. What does African American even mean? That's a different conversation for a different day. But the point is, we were purposely, morphed and shifted and turned into something else. And the way that the whole concept of slavery worked well, because now they don't have to do it anymore. It's all embedded in the systems, it's embedded in the way we think about ourselves. We kill ourselves with what we eat and drink and the way we think and the way we be. We don't have value for ourselves. We got Black people killing Black people. And that's how slavery was so powerful because now I don't have to have my hand directly on the gun anymore. I just left the guns out. I put the guns in the systems. I made sure that education was coded in such a way that you would never know who you were. I made sure the media is controlled by a very few so that you only get images and messages that I want you to get.
Hmm.
I made sure religion is packaged and accessible in a way that you only get what I want you to get. And so I'm controlling what you believe, I'm controlling what you're learning, I'm controlling what you're seeing, and I'm controlling where you can live, what you have access to. And as long as I do that, I can keep you in your box, in your bubble. You'll stay scared and sad, and you'll never come out and awaken. And that's how you know slavery is still alive and it worked.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we should have an episode on that because slavery is way more powerful than just the act of being enslaved. Like it was way deeper than that, and it's followed us. And like I
Hmm.
say all the time, it wasn't that long ago. So like it is definitely like if we think of like what was that? Someone told me the other day, like it takes like 7 years for 7 to 9 years for a mother's body after they have a baby to, you know,
To regenerate.
yeah, and
Hmm.
there's another thing too that's maybe not PG, but that takes a certain amount of years to completely get out of your body. And it's like we're still early in that. And like you said, the gun being set down and just be like, okay, we're just gonna set up these systems so that you guys want to kill each other because we know how you were raised, because we know how you feel, because we
Hmm.
know you're gonna resort in anger, because that's what your dad taught your dad and that.
Hmm.
And like
And
it's
we do it to you.
all it's been all laid out for us, but now any of the kids up coming up today, they're starting to get not the full picture.
Absolutely not. That was the whole point. None of us ever actually got the full picture. And that's why it's up to us, right, to have the conversations and to teach it and put the pieces together and to figure out a way. That's how we honor the lineage. And that's the work that never goes away. That's exhausting, right, that we die doing because it never ever stops in terms of the context of America. Now, there is a broader context around this because when we add the spiritual element, we're talking about a very practical element in terms of what's going on here on Earth, right? And I'm not going to start a whole new topic. I'm going to stay focused. I swear I am. But from a broader spiritual perspective, there is still a reason behind this. It's greater meaning. It's greater things that you can extrapolate from it to help you understand the whys in a way so that you don't have to stay perpetually angry. Because the truth will piss you off and leave you in a state where you're just on fire all the time,
Hmm.
right? That's what the breaking open, that's what the burning and the ashes and the volcano erupting, that's what it's all about. And that's why many of us, I know that, and I just don't want to talk about it. I just would rather not be there. Let's just keep it light, right? And
Yeah.
and and that's what you run from. That's what you run from. But there is light at the end of the tunnel. This is just a piece of the puzzle that we're talking about. We're talking about putting the context together, tracing it beyond your own personality, your traits, and your characteristics so that you understand where this stuff came from. Because the point is the context without the blame and the humanizing of it and the understanding that it's threads and its lineage. This gives you power. Now, it gives you power. You have a choice, right? That's the point of all this. Is not to just stay lost in it and be like, oh man, my lineage is this and this is so hard. And my grandfather did this and his grandfather did that. And oh my God. No, it's not about the heaviness of it. It's about
Yeah.
acknowledging it. You cannot heal what you don't acknowledge. And that's the power in going back. That's why you need to understand who raised you and who raised them and the systems and the context. Because once you have that knowledge, then you want to transmute it. So the journey, the work doesn't stop here, but this is where you start after you've acknowledged that it's deeper than you think. That's what it starts with. It starts with that acknowledgement and the decision to start to unravel those layers and those threads. And then this is where it's going to take you to the past, to the context, to the lineage. And then once you get there, now you wrap the context around it and you start to build those blocks.
Yeah. And it sounds like you're saying, like, look ahead, like, look towards the future. And I think a
Mhm.
lot of us are getting stuck, and particularly right now in the last couple of years, maybe even since COVID, that a lot of us have just been feeling like stuck. We know that something is not right. We know that we haven't gotten the full story, but we just stop there. And because just there's too much going on, there's
Mhm.
functional depression, like we're just functioning and it's working. So what? I'm not going to try and do anything that's going to bring me down because that will happen. Like you can discover and get a lot of context and get carried away and start to just take the heaviness of it, and then that leads you in the wrong direction. So it's knowing and getting this context and even that extra of the future, the framework, kind of what is at the end of the tunnel that helps
Mhm.
you to be able to go back and transmute it. Um, what sacrifices were made? Now, no, what sacrifices were made in the generations before us that now that we can understand differently? So we can just name two because obviously there's a million, but just two that you can think of the sacrifices that were made. And I think of even the civil rights leaders. Those leaders, I want to honor them and what the what the pavement that they've kind of already given us and to keep moving forward in that way too. And I think what 2021, 22, when we had a lot of those waves of lots of movements and what is it? Sorry, I'm like thinking too much and then I'm talking at the same time. So I'm gonna let you talk because I got too much running in my head. But two sacrifices that you feel like our generations have made that we can understand differently now.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I think what comes to mind for me is my grandmother. She died at 36 years old, and the medical reason for that was lung cancer.
Hmm.
In my assessment of the work, she died from a broken heart long before the cancer ever took her. And so she sacrificed her life. At 36, she'd given birth to six, rumored seven children. We don't know about that seventh one. Another secret shame, emotional neglect, all those kind of things wrapped in that. But she gave birth to six children. Her youngest was 6 years old when she died at 36 years old. So that in and of itself is a sacrifice. Both myself, my mother, and my daughter. Well, no, my daughter's not there yet, but myself and my mother have outlived her. And so that was absolutely a sacrifice that she made. I think when I think about my mother specifically, she sacrificed herself, her body, her life. By the time she was 18 years old, over a dozen, not over a dozen, but about 10 men who were supposed to love and protect her had abused her sexually by this time, before she was even an adult. And so she sacrificed herself for me. And so, given my grandmother and my mother have made these specific sacrifices for me, I get to, not I got to, not I have to, right? But I get to honor their stories and look back and tell them in a way where I humanize who they were and I add context and I get to not blame them and then pass those stories forward. I get to do that. And so I'm honored by the ability to do that. I'm not debilitated by it. I'm not ashamed of it anymore
Hmm.
because I've done the work around it. This was stuff that I was very ashamed of that I didn't want people to know. And as I graduated from high school and went to college and got into these other circles. I remember vividly, I was sitting at a conference and we were doing some breakout group work and we were talking about alcohol and drugs. And mind you, all of my aunts and uncles had succumbed to alcohol and drug use. And I watched the demise in the 80s when the crack epidemic hit. And just like in many other communities, it destroyed my family. And so coming from that place, a place of my family know how to get together and party and drink, and it's usually always fighting and something wrong going on. So I'm sitting in this group, and they want us to answer the question: what good things did we learn from our family? What good messages and stories or narratives do we learn from our families about alcohol and drugs? I'm sitting there sweating bullets because there's good things. I don't even have that context. And so I don't want to be seen. I'm wearing a mask. I'm pretending to be someone who came from something other than poverty, something other than drug and alcohol abuse and sexual abuse and single parenthood and teenage pregnancies and huge families. I'm pretending to be somebody else. And so I'm sitting there sweating bullets, not knowing what to say. How do I show up? My mind is racing. I don't want to be found out. I don't want to be seen. And I remember answering the question saying, my family taught me how to party and have a good time without, and my voice got high. All of that happened in real time. And then I remember leaving, getting up from that group and having to go to the bathroom. I didn't have to go to the bathroom. I just needed to remove myself from the space and then pacing in the bathroom, wondering if they believed it, wondering if it sounded believable, if I believed it myself, just questioning myself, just having a whole panic attack and meltdown because I'm in a situation where my mask and the survival strategies that I've learned are being threatened all around alcohol
Hmm.
and abuse. And so to be here today telling my story and honoring who my people are, That's the sacrifice they made.
I think it's really important to point out how important it is for a child to feel like their family or where they came from is of a certain standard because of just how kids view that and how important family is when you are a child. It really is all you came from. You don't
Yeah, it's
really have any
classism.
other accolades to talk about like that.
Mhm.
What they came from is what they are. So I can even think of myself hiding who I was from home to school, like them being two different things because yeah, I don't actually have a lot of good things to say about this and this and this, so I'm just gonna more stray to this. And I feel like my mind mentally also went there where I blocked out those things and stayed on this path. And that's kind of the start of how I lived my life. And even though these things are going on in this dark path over here,
The
I
man.
choose to stay focused on the lighter one where little things I was getting breadcrumbed over here and I was put up a mask and Facebook and all the social media that grew. That doesn't help. It really doesn't. And kids are using that as a, oh, I gotta post this, I gotta post this because then it'll just more balance out all the bad things that are happening that no one knows about. And
Mhm.
emphasis on no one knows about. I think another thing that I wanted to mention is that you know a lot about your family, and there's some people that their family members are ashamed and don't haven't expressed this to anyone, let alone, my cousin or, my nephew or whatever. So, what would you tell someone that doesn't have the same amount of information that you have and they're more going off of just what was done to them and not off of, well, they never told me this and happened. What I know is this, this what I see in the pictures, this is what, but they don't talk to them about that kind of stuff.
Mhm. Mhm. Absolutely. The first thing I want to mention is that classism is real. Okay, so there's a construct out here that tells us what's better and what's not. And so when you put patriarchy, classism, racism, all that together, it tells you that men are above women. It tells you what hierarchy the races go in, right? And it tells you that in terms of class, that this amount of money and you're supposed to look this way, and you're supposed to have these kind of houses and all of that. So we're definitely all struggling with that to some degree, depending on where you fall in these structures. And so that's the reality of what we're looking at and dealing with. And the second piece, in terms of what do you say to somebody who doesn't have this information about their history? Well, I think it can be extrapolated from a number of different ways. And so it's okay to have those conversations and try to break the silence. That's not always received well. It's not always embraced. And so, but that doesn't mean you don't have to have the courage to be able to do it. You can still ask the question. And if they're not answered, that's okay. But that doesn't stop you from going and doing and trying. Who does
Yeah.
have the answers? Is there anyone in the family who can give that information? And I didn't have a lot of people in my family to give me the information. I just utilized what I did have. And then I researched. And so I went and read about the context. I knew my family lived in Hillside, for example. So I went and learned about Hillside, right? And Hillside still existed when I was there and I was coming up. It was a project in here in the city of Milwaukee. And so I could learn about it and I could do my own research. It's a decision, right, around I'm going to do this, right? And then you have to break these silent, unspoken contracts that you have around sweeping this stuff under the rug. We only talk about this at the kitchen table, or we don't talk about it at all. True healing honors the lineage by refusing to repeat the pain. And so that's what you have to agree to and connect to. And then you find it where you can. Like I said, my grandmother was left at a doorstop and on a doorstep. My grandmother was left on a doorstep. And so I don't have that information. What I do understand is the impact that that had on
Yeah.
her growing up, and then how she showed up as a woman and then passed on that abandonment, that emotional no, emotional neglect that was in her epigenetics, and it was passed on through her children to us and beyond. And so that's what I understand. Not because I ever had a conversation with her. She died when my mother was 6. And so I did not know this woman, but I wrote about her story through what I was able to extrapolate. So
Hmm.
it comes with the commitment of saying, I'm not doing something wrong. Because that's what the mask, the survival strategies, all of that paints a picture that you're betraying somebody, right? What goes on in this house stays in this house. We don't talk about that, right? It's all these kinds of messages out there, and we have to decide that I'm going to heal. I'm going to do something different, and I'm going to refuse to repeat his pain. And in order to do that, I have to go in.
Thank you. This has been a really great conversation. I want to leave our viewers with like some questions really to sit with. And I mean, I encourage people to do it on your phone if you have a little journal, or just even if you have like I have things on my whiteboards all around here for Kenzie, but to buy write stuff down for myself, like somewhere where you can see it and you can really process it and you go back to it, have it written down somewhere. I tell that to my students too. Like writing it down even just helps remembering it better too. So maybe it'll pop up in your head. But do you want to tell us, do you have the last two questions in
Yeah,
front of you?
I have the
Yeah.
questions. I have the questions. And so, given that we have talked here about who raised you, the truths from your bloodline, and then we both shared stories around what those truths were for us. So, in order to help you dive a little bit deeper into your own story, there's two prompts that we have gathered that can help you do that. And so, the first prompt is, who did they have to be to stay safe, accepted, or alive? And I repeat, who did they have to be to stay safe, accepted, or alive? And then prompt two is, what were the dreams they never got to pursue because survival came first? And I'll repeat the second one again. What were the dreams they never got to pursue because survival came first? And with that, I just want to add a little bit more context around the purpose of these questions is not just to go digging, right, and then get stuck in what you learn, but it's to be able to dig so that you can have the context, right, so that you can release the blame and the shame and the guilt around the truths. Because at the end of the day, trauma is not a reflection of worthiness. And that's what we tend to walk around. That's why we don't want to dig into it because we think it's a reflection of our worthiness. We are all more than the broken pieces of our past. And so, in order to stand on your story and not be lost in it, you have to confront it.
Yeah, we're all tied together, literally by our blood. So we've got to confront it. We can't just move it behind us. I'm so excited for our next three episodes. And I am just really excited to work with you and thank you for spitting us facts. And I want people to comment, like if you're able to just tell us if it was hard to do, if it was maybe you were able to, did you have an aha moment? Like make a comment, let us know. I think it would really encourage other people to be like, oh, other people are trying it, like I'll try it too. Like, let me see how it feels. And it's spring. We're coming out of that winter. I call it winter solstice, but winter, like we're coming out, like so try to do this work, guys. I really encourage you to like, share, and subscribe. And please tell us again where we can find your webpage.
Absolutely. So I am Deshelle Parker, Transformation Guide, and you can find me at leveragingtruth.com because that's what I do. I leverage truth. And then here is a copy of the book, Why She Like That. I don't know if you can see that, but it's called Why She Like That. And it is my own story, one woman's journey into her generational trauma and the courage, the healing power, and going back. And so I use my story. There's exercises and prompts and things in there to help you use my story to trigger you to go into your own and dive deep. But again, not just to go and languish in all of the negativity, right? But to really be able to take it and use it as a way to transmute that power and stand on your story, not in it. So you can find me at leveragingtruth.com. That's the book. And I look forward to continued conversations around our lineage, our soul's journey, and the power we have in healing when we confront it.
I love that. Stand on our story, not in it. I love it. Thank you so
Yeah.
much. And thanks for listening, everyone. Bye.
Bye.